Hi everybody, day 2. There's a link, iconic black American figures, Maya Angelou yesterday, the poet, the writer. Today, that guy. Any of you recognise him? That's Muhammad Ali, the greatest heavyweight boxer we've ever seen, and possibly the greatest sportsman that's ever lived. Certainly the most charismatic, the most influential, the most engaging, possibly the most important. He was a crucial figure not only in sporting history but also in the development of the civil rights movement in America. And at the time of the book, the start of the book, he is not Muhammad Ali, his name is Cassius Clay. He changed his name when he converted to the religion of Islam. He changed it to Muhammad Ali. So this is him as a young Cassius Clay stepping into the ring for the first time to compete for the heavyweight championship of the world against the then Sonny Liston, the most feared fighter of the time. No one expected Clay to win. The perspective also moves between the moment when he fought Sonny Liston to when he's older in life. He has Parkinson's disease in his 50s and he's reflecting back on that fight and watching clips of it. So you'll see the perspective, you'll hear the perspective move between the two. But I hope you enjoy this extract. Cassius Clay entered the ring in Miami Beach wearing a short white robe, the lip stitched on the back. He was fast, sleek and 22, but for the first and last time in his life he was afraid. Clay began bouncing on the balls of his feet, shuffling joylessly at first, like a marathon dancer at 10 to midnight, but then with more speed, more pleasure. After a few minutes, Sonny Liston, the heavyweight champion of the world, stepped through the ropes and onto the canvas, gingerly like a man easing himself into a canoe. He wore a hooded robe. His eyes were unworried and they were blank, the dead eyes of a man who'd never gotten a favour out of life and never given one out. He was not likely to give one to Cassius Clay. Nearly every sports writer in the Miami Convention Hall expected Clay to end the night on his back. The young boxing writer for the New York Times, Robert Lipsyte, got a call from his editors telling him to map out the route from the arena to the hospital, the better to know the way once Clay ended up there. The odds were 7 to 1 against Clay, and it was almost impossible to find a bookie willing to take a bet. On the morning of the fight, Jackie Gleason, the most popular television comedian in the country, said, "I predict Sonny Liston will win in 18 seconds of the first round." Even Clay's financial backers expected disaster, assuming that this could be the young man's last night in the ring. It was the night of February 25th, 1964. A cloud of cigar smoke drifted through the ring lights. Cassius Clay threw punches into the grey floating haze and waited for the bell. "See that? See me?" Muhammad Ali sat in an overstuffed chair watching himself on the television screen. The voice came in a swallowed whisper, and his finger waggled as it pointed towards his younger self, his self preserved on videotape. 22 years old, getting warm in his corner, his gloved hands dangling at his hips. Now Ali was whispering again. "See me? You see me?" "That's the only time I was ever scared in the ring," Ali said. "Sonny Liston, first time, first round, said he was going to kill me." Ali was heavy now. He had the athlete's disdain for exercise and ate more than was good for him. His beard was grey, and his hair was going grey too. I'd come up to Michigan to see him because I wanted to write about the way he'd created himself in the early 60s, the way a gangly kid from Louisville managed to become one of the most electric of American characters, a moulder of his age and a reflection of it. As Cassius Clay, He entered the world of professional boxing at a time when the expectation was that a black fighter would behave himself with absolute deference to white sensibilities. As an athlete, he was supposed to remain aloof, distant from the racial and political upheaval going on around him. Clay not only responded to the upheaval, he responded in a way that outraged almost everyone. He changed his religion and his name. He declared himself free of every mould and expectation. Cassius Clay became Muhammad Ali. Nearly every American now thinks of Ali with misty affection. He was a warrior who came to symbolise love. But that transformation in the popular mind came long after Ali's period of self-creation in the early 60s. I had to prove you could be a new kind of black man, Ali told me. I had to show that to the world. Back in 1964, the fight began. In black and white, Cassius Clay came bounding out of his corner and right away started circling the square, dancing, moving around and around the ring, moving in and out, his head twitching side to side as if freeing himself from a neck crick early in the morning, easy and fluid. And then Liston, a great bull whose shoulders seemed to cut off access to half the ring, lunged with a left jab. Liston missed by 2 feet. At that moment, Clay hinted not only at what was to come that night in Miami, but at what he was about to introduce to boxing and to sports in general, the marriage of mass and velocity. A big man no longer had to lumber along and slug. He could punch like a heavyweight and move like a dancer. Cassius Clay was in complete control of the fight. There were welts under both of Liston's eyes. He had aged a decade in 15 minutes. Ali loved it then, and he was loving it now. People shouted every time Liston threw a punch, he whispered. They was waiting, but now they can't believe it. They thought Liston had knocked me into the crowd. Look at me! Clay danced and jabbed. By the 6th round, Clay was a toreador, filling a bull's back with blades. At the end of the 6th, Liston sat down on his stool and stayed there. He quit. Ali smiled as he watched his younger self dancing around the ring, shouting, "I'm king of the world, king of the world," and climbing the ring ropes and pointing down at the sports writers. Eat your words, eat your words. The next day, Clay would announce that he was not merely the heavyweight champion, but a member of the Nation of Islam. Within a few weeks, he would have a new name. And within a couple of years, he would make out of himself a fast and funny kid from Louisville, Kentucky, one of the most compelling and electric American figures of his age. He became so famous that in his travels around the world, Ali could gaze out of airplane windows, down at Lagos and Los Angeles, down at Paris and Madras and London, and be assured that almost everyone alive knew who he was. He hit people for a living, and yet by middle age he would be a symbol not merely of courage, but of love, of decency, even a kind of wisdom. Back in Ali's room, a cleaning woman walked into the room, put aside her vacuum cleaner and sat down to watch the screen. On screen, Cassius Clay was still screaming, "King of the world! Ain't I pretty?" "Oh, Ali," she said, "you had a big mouth then." "I know," he said, smiling, "but wasn't I pretty? I was 20 what? 22. Now I'm 54. 54, he said. He said nothing for a minute or so. Then he said, "Time flies, flies, flies. It flies away." Then very slowly, Ali lifted his hand and fluttered his finger like the wings of a bird. "It just flies away."